Welcome back to Beyond the Buckets. Thank you for joining us. We've got another fantastic guest, Jonathan Reitz. Welcome to the program.
Thanks, Chris. Great to be here. Definitely excited to talk about the extension of what happens on the court to all the good things that the rest of life can produce. So excited about this.
Well, I appreciate you for joining and really looking forward to our conversation. But I'd like to start off with a fun fact about yourself, something that even if you know Jonathan, that you might not even really know.
All right. I hate to admit this one, but I'm going to. I spilled a cup of coffee on the President of the United States.
That's pretty good. So give me the context behind it and which president were we speaking
All right, we're talking about Bill Clinton. And technically he wasn't the president yet, but it was a question of 48 hours before it happened. I was a television news reporter in those days in 1992, right before the presidential election. And he was doing a stopover in the city where I lived in Davenport, Iowa. Iowa was a battleground state that particular year. And of course, Davenport, Iowa is on the Mississippi River, and Illinois is right across the river from there. So he could do a 2-for-1 kind of thing. He was making a whistleblower stop, bunch of stops, one right after another. I was one of the reporters assigned to cover that particular event. He walks up, he's shaking hands, he gets up to the gaggle of reporters there. I've got my coffee in one hand, I've got my microphone in the other hand. I asked the question, and I just got flustered. I'm not too proud to admit, because I didn't stick the microphone out. I stuck the cup of coffee out, and the coffee flew out of the cup and down the side of the president, and the soon-to-be president. And he kind of laughed. He said, "I'm really not that thirsty." He couldn't have been nicer about it. Couldn't have handled it better. Yeah. And the best part about it is that was 1992. He's reelected in 1996. Yep. I actually got to meet him again in early part of 1998. He remembered. He's like, "You're the guy that spilled the coffee on me." And I went, "Yes, I am." And later on, the Secret Service told me that one of his handlers had prepped him about that. So I question whether or not he actually remembered. But that's a story that almost no one would know about me. Wow. That I am not too proud to admit we've now released on Beyond the Buckets.
I love it. And there's not too many times when you can find a story that everybody can relate to. And it may not be in this context the future president of the United States, but you have done some really embarrassing things or have embarrassing moments in situations where you don't think, or you definitely don't want those to occur. Mm-hmm. So I can definitely side with you. There's been times where I've tripped in public situations where I might be getting up to talk on stage, or one of the this is one that, since it's Beyond the Buckets, I'll share. But it was I was in adolescence. I think I was 14 years old, and it was the first time that I was kissing a young lady.
All right.
And that was the time that I broke wind, right when it was beginning to happen. And it was an extremely embarrassing thing for me. And luckily, I'm still here today. I'm not traumatized by the full experience, but needless to say, that was not my proudest moment as a young man, 14 years old. And for your first kiss, you kind of break wind. So
yeah, that's not how the script is supposed to go. Is it?
Definitely. If you couldn't tell, I'm still blushing right now today.
Yeah, as am I, thinking to myself, the thing as I think about that Bill Clinton moment, the thing I remember like it was yesterday is not what happened afterward, not how he responded, not the gasp of the people. Yes, I do remember the gasps of the people around me. But sure, the thing I remember in the moment, like it was yesterday, is how flustered I felt at that particular moment. I remember how that felt. And I'm still going to school on it. It's 30 years ago. In October this year, it'll be 30 years ago.
Wow.
That happened. November, I guess, technically. It was like 1st or 2nd of November. And that moment how it felt at that. I'm feeling that way right now telling you about it. It's an amazing thing that our minds have to be able to take us back to those moments. And you may not remember the details, but I will pretty much guarantee we remember how it felt in that specific moment to go back to that. And sometimes just the sheer commitment to avoid a moment like that ever again, your story or mine, is a pretty powerful motivator for us to handle our business differently.
Well, tell me how you were able to reset. We have a big playoff game. We're playing the number 1 team in the state tonight.
Okay.
And we're one of the top 20 teams in the state as well. But our biggest thing is resetting, being able to reset if things are going good, if things are going bad. So in that moment where that coffee, goes on the future president, how are you able to reset in a high leverage moment where obviously there's some tension, there's some angst, there's some anxiety there? How were you able to reset in that moment, and have you used that moment to reset you in other situations?
I remember my high school basketball coach, Dennis Haberhern. I played at Lutheran East High School in Cleveland Heights, Ohio. Proud to tell you we're the defending state champs this year. Won the state title last year. Far better team than any of the ones that I was on, and we were pretty good, but this team was that team last year was special. Coach Haberhern used to tell us that we were not anywhere near as good as our best moments, nor were we anywhere near as bad as our worst moments. That was the theme. I played 4 years of varsity and started 3 years. In my sophomore year, that was the theme. That was really the theme. We thought we were going to make a pretty deep run. We ended up not going quite as far in the state playoffs as we hoped we would. We went farther the next year, but the theme my sophomore year, Coach really drilled into us. Look, you're not as good as your good moments. You're also not as bad as your bad moments. And man, that advice has come back to me for my entire adult life. And just remembering to normalize that mid area where consistently doing as well as I can. Maybe having a mountaintop here and there or a valley here and there, but not dwelling in that. And I remember thinking in the days after that, going, because there was a newspaper column about this. There was some the media covering the media around this particular instance. I took a beating. And my bosses took a beating, basically going, "Hey, why would you put the new guy out covering the president, the soon-to-be president of the United States?" Because I was relatively new. I'd been there, 6 months, something like that. And I just remember Coach Haberhern saying to me, "Look, you're not as good as your good days, but you're not as bad as your bad days either." And that got me out of bed a lot over the course of that next few years, the next few months, and I guess years is probably safe as well. And then the other big thing is, one thing I'm going to be completely transparent here with you, Chris, and say that I have a really long depression history. 35 years. When I was a college basketball player, it set in on me. And, I jokingly say it was when I realized I wasn't going to play after college that depression kicked in. But that's not actually true, because I realized a long time ago that I wasn't going to play after college, long before this moment. But that timing is convenient. And one of the things I learned in counseling, probably right about this same time as the whole coffee on the president story, was that participation precedes motivation. And resetting for me is all about, you know what, I don't feel like jumping in right now. I don't feel like bringing my A game. I don't feel like putting my focus where it needs to go. But participation precedes motivation. And so if I can jump in and continue with my high level of effort, my benchmark level of effort, lots of good things come from that. So right. It really has been those two things. And those two things are really themes in my entire adult life. not as high as the high points, not as low as the low points. And participation precedes motivation. Adding those two together really is that's a roadmap for a pretty healthy reset, for me at least.
Definitely. I think about all the things that have happened in my life, the things that I didn't really want to do, but knew I needed to do. And just this morning, I didn't want to work out. We have a home gym here, and I didn't want to work out, but there's really no excuse for me not to, because it's right here. One of the best things that we did in our family was trying to create that. And so going in there, I got about a 90-minute workout in today. Kids were at school. My wife was at work, and I'm off this week. So it was just an awesome time. I was able to watch film while I was working out in the gym. And it was something that I didn't want to do, but I got so much benefit from it. And that's the same thing that you're talking about as far as just going out there and participating, even when you know you might not have it. Just try your best and see where you land. And one of the things that when you were talking reminds me, and I heard this from another coach, it was there's two types of coaches, and this really can go down many different walks of life, two different type of people, two different type of doctors, what you name it. It's there's two types of coaches. You are either the humble coach or a coach that is going to be humbled. And you can kind of take that for any walk of life, any type of person, because you're never as good, as you mentioned, as your best ever. And you're never as bad as your worst effort ever, but you're somewhere in between. And I always tell people this: I don't have to win all of the time. I just got to win more than I lose. And that's being a parent, that's being a coach, that's being an educator or a business owner. That goes into everything. And the way that you framed it is a way that I haven't looked at it before. But it's all really the same thing. And a lot of high motivated people, they do go through bouts of depression. So I'm extremely excited that not excited that you've gone through it, but you're able to be that you're able to be transparent about some of the things that you've gone through in order to maybe even help me, but help the listeners. So I just appreciate the perspective that you've put on your own issues in your life and how you frame things and how you're able to reset.
You know, it's interesting you bring that up, because I used to hide from it. I used to keep it a deep, dark secret. But I had a conversation with a mentor of mine a few years ago, and he said to me, bottom line is it's a part of your story. You can downplay it. You can decide not to talk about it, but it's still going to be a part of your story.
Right.
And I went, oh yeah, that's right. If I'm honest about it, then, if I'm honest about the fact that this is a part of my story, I've got, this is probably another reset idea. This is probably another component about that is I can be completely honest about it and admit to myself that the story isn't over yet. I'm not done.
Right.
And that's a pretty powerful place from which to come, if you think about it. Because you know what? Been through some ups and downs. The some of the high highs have been really good. Some of the low lows have been really rough. But the story's not over.
For sure.
What I contribute into that story is going to be a key piece to it all.
Yeah. I'd like to know a little bit of background about you. So maybe give me a 2-minute origin story about you. You obviously said you played at a high level in high school, played college basketball, didn't have a professional career, but probably gained a lot of things from your time playing college hoops. So give me a 2-3 minute origin story about you.
All right. Grew up on the east side of Cleveland, Ohio, in the 70s and 80s, mostly 80s. Played at Lutheran East High School on the east side of Cleveland. Had a very short-lived Division I opportunity at a school I won't name because I'm not allowed. No, I'm teasing. They invited me to no longer participate because I was not quite ready for college. We'll just put it that way. And then played Division III ball at Case Western Reserve here in Cleveland in the late 1980s, and from a family of ball players. I have a number of cousins that played professionally in Europe. I was not that skilled, not as skilled as they are. I was also not as tall as those guys are, because in my cousin in the list of my male cousins, I am the short one. I'm only 6'6". So the family has good genes in that regard, and some pretty good 4s and 5s.
For sure.
On the other parts of the family.
Well, there's some pretty good guys at 6'6". Probably the best player to ever lace them up, Michael Jordan, and one of my favorites, Kobe Bryant too. So
Yeah,
6'6" is no slouch.
Well, I actually have met both those guys, and I am a little taller than Michael, and Kobe was a little taller than me. So I think Kobe at 6'6" is downplaying it.
Right.
So
because when he came out, I feel like he was 6'7".
Yeah.
When they listed him in high school, but I think just the commonalities between the two, why not be the same height?
Yeah,
when you mimic that actual person, your whole life and whole career, basically.
Yeah, right on. And full disclosure, I am a Cleveland boy. You say greatest player of all time, and I thought, no, LeBron is 6'8". So, we're just going to agree to disagree on that particular topic.
Well, I'm from the Bay Area. My favorite team happens to be the Warriors. And I do want to get back to your story, but Steph Curry kind of took over in that All-Star game there with 16 threes, 50 points. Now, LeBron capped it off. Hats off to the king. Nothing but respect, but
right on. Yeah, you cannot deny the fact that the man can shoot a three. Steph can shoot a three. I wouldn't have been upset if perhaps he had been guarded a little closer. Just saying.
Sure.
But the man can shoot a three. Let's be honest. And I'm a Cavs fan. If you could see just to the left of where the camera view is here, on my wall there is a view of LeBron blocking Andre Iguodala in Game 7. Because I am from Cleveland. It's the only championship we've had my entire lifetime. So that 5-year run was a really great run for our area, and one of the young men that I've coached in years past, his dad is from Cleveland, and we would watch every single one of those games together at a local establishment, and it was just awesome. It was great camaraderie, and I felt bad for him the first time that when we won in 15, but the 16 championship, obviously Draymond Green was not there for one of the games, but it is what it is. I'm happy for Cleveland. I'm happy for LeBron. I do think he's one of the top two best players. I don't think he's the best, but everybody has their own opinion on it. But he's a great player, and he deserves his flowers. I think he gets taken for granted. The high level. We're talking about a high level athlete. He's been at a peak for a long time, for more than anybody has ever done it. Yeah, so I agree with you that. I agree with you there. I have to say on the night of that game in 2016, Game 7 in 2016, I actually was in San Francisco.
Oh, were you?
And I was in a local establishment in San Francisco. As you can imagine, I had a different hope for the game than every other attendee in the establishment.
Mm-hmm.
And to the Warrior fans' credit, because it would not have been this way had it been reversed in Cleveland.
Sure.
Everyone was spectacular. They were bummed. There was disappointment, but every single person in that place treated the Cavs fan well. And I was wearing a LeBron jersey that night. I'm not too proud to admit. I look back on it and I think to myself, what was I thinking?
Yeah.
But the response of the Warriors fans that night was absolutely tremendous. Just you couldn't hope for a better way for that to have played out, and it really that's a memory I will cherish for a long time. Just because, A, great game, B, really classy fan base.
For sure. Yeah, you can't say that about all the Bay Area. I guess it's a former Bay Area team now, the Raiders. But I was in college, and my friends got some tickets to the Raiders game, and I happened to be wearing red that day, and they were playing the Chiefs. So we go. I had no clue. I'm on the way up there, like, who are they playing? Kansas City. It's like, I'm wearing red today. This is not a good situation. No. So luckily I made it out unscathed. But if you don't go looking for anything, most of the time you won't find it, or kind of de-escalate situations. But I'm glad the fans here in the Bay Area were kind to you. And that's just really what it should be. That's our team. We're obviously rooting for them, but at the end of the day, it just gives us entertainment and enjoyment, and we want to see our team win. But if they lose, life goes on. It's not the end of the world, I guess, unless you're in Cleveland.
Well, you're right. That's absolutely the case. I bumped into Channing Frye in an airport, I don't know, a year or two ago, and walked up to him and said, "Hey, just wanted to say, I live in Cleveland. I grew up in Cleveland. Cavs fan since I was a kid. My wife and I had so much fun watching you play. Really appreciated your attitude. Really appreciated what you brought on the court, first of all, and to the team in general." And he didn't have to do this. He stopped. He took a moment, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "Hey, I really appreciate that. And the fans in Cleveland have been nothing but great to me. And isn't that what the game's supposed to be about?" And I just kind of stood there for a second and went, "Yeah, that's exactly what it's supposed to be about." It was nice to hear that out of the mouth of a guy who was on the court in the middle of all of that. I mean, he was on 3 of those 4 finals teams.
Yeah, he didn't play much, but he was great, a great teammate, and he stressed the floor with his ability to shoot. He's
absolutely.
Teammate.
And always had an encouraging word, always, first guy off the bench to cheer for something good, first guy off the bench when something went sideways to be the right kind of teammate for the guys coming off the court. You can't underestimate how valuable that actually is. And, that's a skill, that's a mindset, that's an orientation that I wish the world had more of. Not just basketball, but the world. I wish the world had more of that mindset.
For sure. So talk about growing up in Cleveland, and it just feels like whenever you talk about the city, everybody that's from there seems like they have a chip on their shoulder, like they're the underdog. Where does that come from?
It comes from 2 places, maybe 2.5 places. Believe it or not, one of them is the fact that other than 2015 through 2018 and the occasional baseball season, our sports teams have been lousy for 50 years, almost 60 years. It feels a little funny for me to say this to you out loud, Chris, but that wears on you after a while. I'll give you a prime example. The Cleveland Browns this year are a prime example. Prior to the football season this year, everybody had Super Bowl hopes for this team, and they came apart. Now, they came apart playing hard, which is, if it's going to happen, that's what you're hoping for. But there was consistent collective disappointment. And that's just been cumulative over a bunch of years. Right. That's a real thing. Now, second thing is, if you know any Cleveland history at all, you probably know about the fact that in the late 1960s, the river that runs through downtown Cleveland was so polluted it caught on fire. That's a true story. Yep. It did actually happen. What most people don't know is that it did happen more than once. And it was 50 years ago.
Wow.
And people still bring it up. So now that's one of the things that I also think cumulatively just has gotten to the point where Clevelanders are going, you know what, the heck with this. Stop it, cut it out. You want to go? Have you seen the river lately? And the fact of the matter is that river is now clean enough to swim in. The EPA has done all that work. It's pretty impressive what's happened in that particular area, because it was a disaster. I remember growing up. I remember we didn't go downtown when I was a kid because it was just sort of a toxic waste dump. It's not that anymore. It's actually pretty cool in downtown Cleveland these days. So those two things are a big part of it. And then the third part of it is that Cleveland for a long time has been an easy punchline. And I personally, now I am not unbiased. so let me just own that right to you. I am not unbiased on what I'm about to say.
Yep.
But I don't think the easy punchlines fit anymore. They might have at one time, but that's a dead horse. And you want to get a sense of whether or not somebody's actually from Cleveland is make a Cleveland joke and see what the response is. If they're laughing and going, oh, yeah, that's funny, they're probably not actually from here.
There you go.
If they're ticked off, if they're ready to go, then you've probably found a Clevelander. And
For sure.
It's one of those things that it's just the culmination, the accumulation over time of a whole long list of stuff like that. The sad part about it is a lot of it's true, but all of it was a long time ago.
For sure.
And that's the thing.
Yeah. It's a lot of the things that are in our history are deep rooted. And I just think about where I grew up. It was an abundance of wealth in the Silicon Valley. Our sports teams have generally always been pretty good. I grew up in the 49ers era where I loved the 49ers when I was a kid. Joe Montana, Jerry Rice, and my uncle was a sports agent. He was Charles Haley's agent. So I was able to be around a lot of those people at a young age. And I do want to get to another question I'm going to ask you later about jazz because my uncle owned a jazz club here in downtown San Jose. But I've seen nothing but success from the Niners. The Giants, more recently, they've got 3 championships within the last 10 years. The Raiders have 3 championships. All of our teams, even the A's, used to be very good. So, and the Sharks have been good. They haven't won a championship, but they've been very good throughout all of these things. And then the Warriors have always had a great fan base. And then obviously the recent success with 3 championships in 5 years. So I've just been really, really blessed to be in an area that is kind of abundant. And especially when the internet companies and the tech companies started to come in, it was just a situation where we've always kind of felt elite. So when you go to another place and you say you're from California, you kind of get that, oh, you're from California vibe. But it's the same thing when you hear about Cleveland, you've got this perception of what it actually is. And you kind of let that foster your own thoughts, even if that may not be true anymore. But something that is so deep rooted is hard to be uprooted if you're speaking of it that way. So I just think it's very interesting on where people grew up, what the dynamics are, and how they end up the way they are because of their environment and their circumstances.
This is the Cleveland's a really good example of what Coach Abraham taught. It never was as bad as the jokes made it sound. It's got a really nice reputation right now. I mean, we just had the NBA All-Star game here over this past weekend. We had the Major League Baseball All-Star game here a couple of summers ago. There's been a bunch of really nice high points for Cleveland in the last few years. It's probably not that nice, but consistently, it is a much nicer place in which to live than I think it gets credit for, and natives are just worn down about that. So yeah, I think it is fascinating to see the effect that your homeland, your city of origin plays on you, because Cleveland has definitely had at least an influence on who I am and how that's all come to life.
For sure. No, I love it. Just switching topics just a little bit, not a great segue, but tell me about Fluxify and what you're doing there and how you're able to coach and mentor other businesses, if I'm getting that in the correct correct context.
Yeah, I'm an executive coach. I work with leaders in all kinds of different organizations, ranging from, well, NBA teams. I have a couple clients that work for NBA teams, to social media companies headquartered not far from where you grew up, to tiny little coffee shops in small cities in Southern Ohio, and everything in between. The commonality of what I do as an executive coach is I typically work with leaders that are starting something new, that are wondering if they're up to the job. And that commonality runs from CEOs of multinational companies to the guy that owns a UPS store franchise in a suburb of Akron.
So is what you're doing similar to what Bill does with the nonprofit sector?
Bill Woolsey and I go back a long way. Bill Woolsey is actually a former client of mine. That's one of the ways that we know each other. I'm dying to know what the heck you talked to Bill Woolsey about basketball, though.
Well, it didn't have it. Well, this podcast is Beyond the Bucket. So there's, yes, I'm a basketball coach, but also I'm a business owner and an educator and different things. So we talked a little bit about basketball here, but I don't think we talked much about basketball at all. And
I'm relieved to hear that.
That's the beauty about Beyond the Buckets is we speak on multiple different topics.
Yeah, right on.
We're not just like, I love basketball, don't get me wrong, but it's not the only thing in my life that I'm interested in. And so that's why I just like conversations like these, because I didn't know we were going to talk about Cleveland for 10 minutes, and I really enjoy it because it's just a different perspective that you normally don't get, Well,
I appreciate that. So there is some similarity to what Bill does with Bill really is a training provider that says, hey, here's a process. Let's get you into the process. Let's help you execute based on the benchmarks that we've identified for a launch process. I really focus on the individual, who you are becoming as you're working in these particular areas, as you're focused on some of these outcomes or these opportunities. That's a little bit different strategy than what Bill does. So, Chris, I'd love to tell you that this was the plan. I went to college thinking I was going to be an electrical engineer. My father was a physicist, for goodness sake. And, never in a million years did I think I'd do anything that I ended up doing for a living. I got most of the way through an electrical engineering degree and went, I don't really like engineers. I can't really imagine working with these folks. Sorry, if there's an engineer listening to this, it is not personal. It's just one of those things that I don't think that way. And I was causing discomfort in the cohort of students that I was in, and they were causing discomfort in me. And I just kind of went, I don't want to be a barrier. I don't want to cause problems like this. And so that evolved into, well, I decided to take a year off from college to figure out what I was going to do. And during that year, I got into stand-up comedy, which was fun, but I was terrible at it. And somebody saw something in me being on stage one time and invited me to work on a radio show. Literally from no experience, no background, nothing. They said, hey, why don't you come be the third voice in this 3-person show? And I went, all right. And that led into doing morning radio for a bunch of years, which led into doing morning television for a bunch of years. And I will never forget this. On April 25th, 1997, across the chain of TV stations where I worked, they invited a cross-section of us. There were about 30 of us in the room to a 3-day offsite event. And 45 minutes into the first session of the first morning, they brought in this guy to facilitate us working together. And about 15 minutes later, I leaned over to Mary Margaret Downey, who I just found on Facebook, and who she told me she remembers this story. I leaned over to her and I said, I don't know what that guy's doing, but that's what I'm going to do after I get out of television. And I went up to him at the break. Turned out his name was Steve Martin. Not that Steve Martin, because he was not a wild and crazy guy in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
But I said, Steve, what are you doing here? What is this? He said, well, I'm an executive coach. I work with individuals and teams and projects. And I was like, I've never seen anything like this. How do I learn to do this? How do I learn to do what you're doing? And he went, I'll help you. And I literally talked to that guy every day for the next 5 years. And he got me started in this thing. And like I say, that was April 25th, 1997. I have literally been in a coaching conversation every day since then.
Wow.
You know, in a couple of weeks, it'll be 25 years.
Wow. I didn't know that was going to go that way, from being a stand-up comic to morning radio to morning television to executive coach.
I've been so lucky. You know, the joke I make, I've said this to Bill Woolsey a couple of times. Bill Woolsey, former Beyond the Buckets guest, that there was a plan for what was going to happen to me for my life. Wasn't my plan, but there was a plan, because too many doors have opened at just the right time.
Wow.
For all this. So,
well, first of all, tell me about being a stand-up comic. Did you bomb your first opportunity on stage, and what is the process like getting prepared for that? My wife and I just watched Ali Wong's most recent Netflix special, and she's just got a gift. I mean, it is extremely raunchy and vulgar, but she has a way of articulating it in such a narrative, funny way that you can understand and see the sequences that are going on, because some of those thoughts may even go through your head on a day-to-day basis, but you never really can put it in that context. And I've always been fascinated by anybody that can paint a picture, tell a story, be funny, and continue to stack on top of it, and then you wrap it up with this big bow at the end. And it's just an amazing thing that I think it takes talent, skill, all the above, hard work. But tell me, what was your process being a stand-up comedian that obviously didn't make it, but it wasn't your plan, like you mentioned?
Two things about it. Two things I'll mention about it. First of all, the first 5 or 6 times were dares. I used to go to this bar.
And before you continue, did you have a bit ready to go for the?
Oh gosh, no. Oh gosh, no.
So it was just freestyle off the cuff.
Oh no, I had a beer in my hand.
Okay, yeah.
I had adult beverages. Motivated the launch of my stand-up career. I'm not too proud to admit that. And you know, the first 5 or 6 times were dares, usually from girls I wanted to date. And I went, yeah, okay, I'll give it a try. And the first 3 or 4 times were absolute agony. And then, you know, when you do an open mic like that, you get 5 minutes. And
that's a long time.
Oh my goodness, you have no idea how long a time is.
I couldn't imagine.
When you have no act prepared, that's so long. And so finally I realized that I had to make a choice. If I was going to keep going to this bar, I better figure out what I was going to say the next time somebody dared me, because I knew somebody would dare me. I'm a relatively friendly guy. You're getting a sense of who I am. What you see is what you get. You know, I'll talk to anybody. The third or fourth time I took questions from the crowd, and that went really well. That was where I was like, okay, that was fun. And I also realized that I was not going to get anywhere near. I was not going to be anything other than you know, a joke. It wasn't going to help me get dates, get the phone number of the girl that would dare me to go up there. You know, it wasn't going to work unless I could actually be at least a little bit funny. And you know, I was 20 or 21. I thought I could go up there and just wing it and it would work, and it's not the case. It's not how it goes. No. So I spent 6 or 8 or 10 like weekends legit working on jokes, and I picked out a local comedian here in Cleveland that I liked, and I said, I'm gonna figure out what he does, and I'm gonna do my version of what he does. Because the first thing they tell you when you talk to a stand-up is don't ever steal material. First thing they tell you, no matter what. And the first bit I remember doing that, back in the day, there used to be these personal ads, these singles ads in the newspaper, and they had a code with them where they would say, SWF, single white female, or SSF, single suburban female, or, all of that kind of stuff. The first bit I ever remember doing that landed at all was I took a newspaper up there with me and I pulled it out of my hand. And I was like, I'm going to read you some of these, because can you believe the codes on these? Does anybody understand what these mean? I'm so glad they give us a code. And I'm running through this list, and the one I remember, and I'm not sure this is funny to anybody except me, Chris. So thanks for indulging me on telling you this. The one I remember was like, oh, this is an interesting one. AMWOC. And yeah, you're never going to get it, so I'll just tell you what it was. I'm like, oh, interesting. The key says axe murderer with own car. So thank you for indulging me. That's maybe the biggest laugh that joke ever got. But I had this whole shtick where I was walking through these, and they just got sillier and sillier and sillier as time went on. And I remember walking off that night going, if I could figure out how to capture some of this, and if I could just get 10 good minutes, this would be fun. This would be fun. If I could get to the place where it looked like I wasn't even really kind of trying, but I knew it was going to work, that would be really fun. And I'll tell you what, that's a lesson I learned, that the entrepreneurial efforts of my own companies, the coaching I do, that lesson, I talk with people about that all the time, about how, it takes a lot of practice, a lot of effort, a lot of energy to get to that place where it's going to work, and it still looks effortless and smooth to the people around you. That's a valuable business development lesson for any entrepreneur, any leader that wants to move forward. And I learned that thinking about stand-up.
For sure.
So it's been valuable.
It's another interesting perspective, and it goes back to the All-Star game in Cleveland, because Steph was talking about how he made the 16 threes, but he was mentioning that people don't know his process, what he's done to make that become a reality. And so he gets upset sometimes when people just think it's very easy. He's made it look effortless because he's put tireless effort into making it so perfect that he can turn around and not have to look at it and know that it has gone in. Mm-hmm. The level of detail in which that takes is very similar to becoming a stand-up comedian or becoming a entrepreneur or whatever. And you mentioned something early on about your career. You identified what you wanted to do, but you put the 5 years of work in. You put your 10,000 hours in, talking to Steve every single day for 5 years, and probably still stay in contact with him to this day, because that was what you wanted, and you went for it all in. There was no other thing that you were going to. There was other interests that you obviously had, and you probably pivoted and changed different things in your life. But you had one goal, and that was to be the best executive coach you could be, and you went for it. And so for that, I applaud you in your efforts going through the different things. Standing up there in front of people, that's a difficult thing to do. Not too many people could get up and do that. And it goes to something that I think about that happened with me. My mom got me my job. She bought me a car. It was a 1982 528 BMW. And this was in 1999, 2000, all right, somewhere around there. So the car, I was born in 1982, so the car was the same age as me. So it was 16 years old. You couldn't even open the passenger door. I had to climb through and open it from the inside. Yep. But she was like, you need a job. So she got me a job at the Winchester Mystery House. And it was something that I definitely did not want to do. But to this day, I am able to get up from in front of a crowd, whether it be one person, 5 people, 20 people, a whole auditorium, a gym. It doesn't matter, because I memorized this script on how to be a tour guide. And I was giving tours from infants all the way to elderly, 90-year-old people. And I had to be convincing. I had to sell them on what the Winchester Mystery House was. And I can give you the script today. My name is Chris. I'll be your tour guide through Mrs. Winchester's wonderful but bizarre 140-room Victorian mansion. The Winchester Mystery House is on the National Registry of Historic Landmarks. It is also a California landmark and San Jose City landmark, number 868. I can go on and on about it, but it was a process. It took weeks for me to remember this hour-and-a-half script. And for anybody that is listening out there, it's not going to come easy. The best meals are ones that are prepared. There's a reason why Thanksgiving is one of my favorite holidays, because it takes maybe even months to plan or weeks to start to prepare what's going to happen, get everybody together. And it's just such a great meal. You can't replicate that with something that you stick in the microwave or go through the drive-through. Regardless, it may be in and out, but it's still not as good as Thanksgiving dinner.
Right.
And so just seeing the levels of which you've found something that you liked, you went for that, and then you made a small pivot to go to this next thing, and to where you're at now. And like you said, your story's never done. And I greatly appreciate the vast realm of things that you've done in your life and accomplished. So, you know
what I would throw out to you looking back on it, and I'm on the verge of being an old man here, so I'm going to try not to use any get off my lawn kind of stuff here, but the thing that's interesting, and again, I wish I could tell you this was the plan. This was not the plan. But looking back, there is one thing that I can throw out that maybe other people can use moving forward. And that is, of all the things that I've done, there's one skill set that runs through them all. And that's asking questions. And, when I was a comedian, I used to ask questions to the crowd. When I was in morning radio, I would interview people, ask questions. Television journalism, TV journalism was all about interviews, doing video or otherwise, doing sit downs or otherwise. And coaching is really built on the ability to ask questions. So the thing I would throw out to folks is, as you look at your life and maybe think about what comes next, what's something you're really good at that you might be able to use in a different way?
Right.
Because that, like I say, I wish I could tell you that was what I did. Oh, Chris, here's what I did. I realized I was good at asking questions. So I said, instead of asking the crowd questions, maybe I'll interview people no, that's not what happened. It's not even close. It just kind of presented itself. But looking back at it, I now go, you know what? That's a viable strategy for folks thinking about, how do I make the most of the opportunities that I have? And you mentioned speaking in that as a tour guide. The other thing stand-up did for me is there is no crowd on earth more hostile than a 1 a.m. Saturday morning crowd in a comedy club.
No doubt.
When you're not confident in your material.
Oh yeah, and they can feel it too.
You betcha. They see you coming 1,000 miles away. So, as long as I'm not in that situation, it doesn't daunt me to stand up in front of just about any crowd.
Yeah, and that was much harder than standing up in a crowd, and especially if you know what you're talking about. If you've mastered whatever it is that you're speaking about, you're an expert at it.
Yeah.
So if you get up in front of a group and you're talking hoops and you've studied the game, it's very apparent that you know what you're talking about and you're confident about it. When you don't, or you're half-ass, or you kind of finessed your way into a situation, and the more you talk, the more people are going to say, that's kind of BS. And so preparing yourself to get up in front of those crowds is important too.
This doesn't help you in front of a crowd doing a presentation or something along those lines. But I'll tell you what, a couple of really good questions, You might know a tiny little bit about a particular topic. A couple of really good questions will help you have an engaging conversation with just about anybody.
For sure.
And so, if you can really learn to leverage that particular skill set, that's going to take you some places that other things don't. I mean, you know that. Look at this conversation. Based on our long relationship now of about 45 minutes, 50 minutes,
Yeah.
you know that a couple of good questions can take you a lot of places that other things can't.
For sure. And the curiosity, that's one of the reasons why I started the podcast, is I'm curious to understand your process. How did you get to where you got to? And I'm going to, it's been a real selfish thing for me. Yes, I'm putting it out there and hopefully people get something from it, but it's extremely selfish because I'm getting the best of Jonathan right now in real time. And I can't get that just by listening to a podcast, because I'm actually interacting with you. I'm getting that from you. I can't get that from reading a book all the time. I can get that one perspective, but there's so many different nuances to this conversation. And I didn't have any notes. When I first started, I would, write down all my questions. Now I literally looked at your stuff last night to just, let me get a brief background of who Jonathan is. But I want to go into it with an open heart and an open mind and let the conversation go where it's supposed to, because I have no clue where we were going to go. There was other things that I had on my mind that I wanted to touch on. And I guess that's a great topic right now as we kind of wrap it up. But tell me about executive coaching. What type of individuals need it? Obviously, coaching is close to my heart. I think everybody needs coaches. My wife just coached me last night. I said, hey, why do you think I'm like this? Because I notice all details. I'm so very detail oriented. So like if we were watching some bad reality TV and I'm like, wow, they have so many different camera angles. They're getting this side, this side, this side, this side. And she's like, what do you think? I said, why do you think that is? And she told me, and I was like, wow, that was kind of mind blowing. She coached me into really thinking about why I'm so detailed. I noticed the smallest of things. If you move something on my desk or in a room, I'll know. And then there's certain things where I just could care less. So it's just interesting. Yeah. But tell me what type of people need coaching. Why would somebody need executive coaching? Because I'd just like to know.
I'm going to step back from that just for a second and say, look, the traditional definition, target for coaching is people partnering together to facilitate change, to facilitate development or change. I actually use a slightly different description. I want to talk to you about what a coach is as opposed to what coaching is.
And before you go, can I say what I think coaching is?
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be awesome.
I think it's in the simplest terms, and it's two words. And I learned this from the great coach, Sam Peraro, San Jose State baseball, 900 plus wins, changing behavior.
Without a doubt, that's at the core of it. That's at the core of what coaching is.
Mm-hmm.
Let's bookend around that. Let's build around that. If that's the core.
Yep.
What a coach is a person who uses everything they have, their talent, their giftedness, their training, their experience, their background, their woundedness, their scar tissue, their absolutely everything they have to benefit someone else. It's intended to be an altruistic, generous posture that aligns everything you have to offer to benefit someone else. That kind of relationship just does not exist very often in the world. It's just not how we work. We humans don't naturally work that way. You have to learn to function like that. At least most of us have to learn to function like that. I know I absolutely have, because there is no coaching behavior that comes naturally to me, because I'm all about me. If I'm left to me, I'm all about me.
Sure.
So I would argue, though, Chris, that mindset, that set of behavior is what the world needs.
Wow.
If I'm coaching you and I'm saying, look, everything I have is available to you in this conversation, Chris, what do you want to do? What do you want to do with that? That's the way lasting, meaningful, deeply rooted change happens. And so I will throw out to you that your original question was who needs executive coaching.
Yes.
Well, there's two things that make for an ideal coaching client. And the first is the client has to be able to name a specific challenge they're working with. Because one of the things we say in coaching is that you can't coach the things your client won't say. You know, I might be able to tell you, hey, Chris, I see this in you. And if you don't go, yeah, okay, I guess I see that too, it's not on the table. It's not a topic we can work on. So you've got to, as a client, you've got to be able to name a specific challenge, specific opportunity, specific situation where you want to put some energy and effort. And then the second piece of this that really lines up for an ideal coaching conversation is you've got to be willing to have a parallel conversation where I say, all right, Chris, as you're accomplishing your goals, as you're addressing this challenge you gave us, what are you learning about yourself? How are you changing? So there's an internal, introspective kind of conversation that I'm going to have as well. Like I'm working with a CEO in the Bay Area right now, and he's describing some of the things he's learning about himself. And he's like, Jonathan, I don't like this. I don't like what I'm discovering. I'm like, it's okay. It's okay. We'll circle back to what you can actually do with that, or what you might want to do with that. But we're starting with, hey, what are you discovering? Because once you have that new discovery, you know, you can go a whole bunch of different places with it. And I'll wrap this up by, I only take on coaching clients where I can have an ongoing relationship with them. I want to be a trusted resource. You know, there's a guy who's an early childhood education specialist in the Washington, D.C. area, a guy named James Comer, not the guy who was the FBI director. That guy's name's Comey, but James Comer. He says, there is no significant learning without a significant relationship. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the mentalities that I want to bring into the coaching conversation. So that's kind of a three-sided answer to what this whole coaching thing is, the way I put it. And the problems my clients end up working on run the gamut. I mean, you name it. You name it. I've probably had crazy client situations that have worked on it.
Wow. I love that. Last couple things. Tell me about being an accomplished bass player, and I believe you produce some jazz music and things like that.
You know, this is interesting. This is interesting because I mentioned that one of the things coaches do is use your scar tissue or your woundedness to benefit other folks. And that's really what jazz bass is for me these days, is because I have some nerve damage in my left hand and I can't play anymore. And I'm going to be honest with you, Chris, I grieve that. But learning to pay attention to the grief, the sadness, the sad part of that conversation has been really healthy because it's changed the questions I ask. You know, I 100% miss it because I found that I really appreciate much more of the back and forth with the audience playing in a jazz group. It's actually how I met my wife. She was the singer in a jazz group that I ended up joining. You know, she's the real talent. Compared to her, I'm a hack. But she just watching the way she interacted with the people that were listening to the music, and I was like, there's something powerful there about bringing people together, and I miss that. I miss that from the jazz world. So I'm thinking about. I have an invitation to produce a new record for a local group here in the Cleveland area. I have an invitation to help with the arrangements and the production of their upcoming album, and I think I'm going to do it because this is the first time I've actually said that out loud. So, breaking news on Beyond the Buckets.
That's awesome. That's really good. And you're a Beyond the Buckets type of guy with multiple things that you're interested in, and you go all in with the things that you are interested in, and that's important. Last question for you, and this is a question that I posed to Bill. and this is the reason why you're on this show.
All right.
If there's somebody that should come on Beyond the Buckets, who would it be? And before you answer, you have to make sure you make the connection with he or she.
I 100% will. Now that I've had the experience with you, there's a couple that come to mind. Wearing a bunch of those hats, wearing multiple hats, and thinking about how some of those pieces go. There's actually I actually have a Warrior fan friend who. A guy who's a CEO of a really interesting educational startup in the Bay Area that I think would get what this show is all about, would have some interesting things to say, especially about, well, I'm a middle-aged white guy. I've had nothing but privilege my entire life. This guy is Generation 1.5 Chinese. And just has a really interesting view on how education changes us. So I will definitely make the connection to you.
No, I'd love to meet him and love to chat. And this has been a pleasure. Great conversation. I mean, it flew by. Obviously, we had some technical difficulties. I'm just hoping that all the audio works out the way it's supposed to, because this was a fantastic conversation. I can't wait to drop this episode sometime in March, early April.
Definitely appreciate it, and enjoyed the conversation. For what it's worth, it sounded really good on my end. It sounded technically solid, and I say that as a guy who has spent a little bit of time in studios. Everything seemed solid. The levels seemed where they're supposed to be, and I'm cautiously optimistic.
That's awesome. Well, thank you again.